Okay, great. So, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. As I said, I'm Catherine Baxter. I'm really pleased to be hosting this session. The English Association is a learned society and subject association founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education from primary and early years through to secondary and further education to higher education and beyond. And we also cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contributions of our volunteer speakers. So thank you, our wonderful speakers today. Our members make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying membership fees. If you'd like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs from just £29 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you'll get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. So it's my pleasure to hand over to the speakers this afternoon. Claire Lees is going to introduce this session and chair it for us. So I'll hand over to Claire.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I've been looking forward to this session for quite some time. I think I volunteered very early on to chair it because I just knew I'd want to know even more about than I already do about sleeplessness and culture and the arts. So everybody, welcome to Reimagining Sleep, addressing sleeplessness through the arts. This is one of the English Association's collaborations workshops, of which there is a long-standing series, and you can find it on the details, all the details on the EA website, English Association website. I'm Claire Lees. I'm the director of the Institute of English Studies. Our mission is to promote, support, and enhance research in English wherever it is found. So the partnership with the English Association on thinking forwards is particularly appropriate. And it is my delight to introduce two more members of the Northumbria powerhouse, I'm now going to call you, though one of them is currently in Italy. I'm going to hand it over. I'll first of all introduce, and I'm going to hand over to two of our three collaborative speakers on the project. And they will speak about their work on sleeplessness and its crisis for about 10-15 minutes. I'll pick up some questions with them and introduce a discussion. In the meantime, please feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll do my best to field them, monitor them, and hopefully we'll have a really interesting time. We will end on the dot at 2. We really appreciate your time, not just of the speakers, but everybody who's joined us today. So, first of all, let me introduce Dr. Diletta De Cristofaro, who is Assistant Professor of English at Northumbria, who works on the splendidly entitled Cultural Imaginary of Crisis Studies. And boy, do we need that at the moment. She's also the editor of Sleep and Its Meanings, Sociocultural Investigations from Critical Sleep Studies, which is just out from MIT Press 2026. And her colleague, another doctor, but a medical doctor this time, just to prove the reach and excitement of working collaboratively across disciplines. Dr. Pam Alfonso-Miller, who is clinical director of the Northumbria Sleep Research Unit. I hope I've got that right. She's a trained pediatrician, so now I feel bad talking about children and grandchildren earlier on. She's interested in examining, if I can put it in my words, how sleep contributes to our well-being in lots of different ways. So thank you both very much for agreeing to present today, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about this collaborative project. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. And yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's really good to be here. So as Claire mentioned, we were supposed to be three people, Chiara Dellerba, who worked with Pam and I on the project we're about to introduce. She's an artist and curator, sadly couldn't be here, but obviously I'm going to be talking about her role on the project as well. Let me just share my slide. Is this looking okay? Cool, fantastic. Okay, so we're here to talk about the Reimagining Sleep project, which is the kind of public engagement side of a research project I conducted between 2020 and 2024, which explored the writings of the sleep crisis. Basically, I'm going to say a little bit more about this project in a moment, but it's about the representations in literature and culture of today's sleeplessness. So Reimagining Sleep, which is the public engagement project Pam and I and Chiara collaborated on, was funded by Wellcome, whereas Writing the Sleep Crisis was funded by the Wellcome Trust and the European Union. And if you're curious to find out more about both projects, there are links on the slide, and yeah, you can look through the pages and find out a little bit more about these projects beyond, of course, what we're going to talk about today. So, as I said, the kind of like broader project is called Writing the Sleep Crisis. So, of course, the sleep crisis is the context of the collaboration that we're going to be talking about today. So I'll just hand over to Pam, who is going to talk a little bit more about this specific crisis.
So the Northumbria Center for Sleep Research was established in 2009 by Professor Jason Ellis. We are a multidisciplinary group with diverse backgrounds, including experimental and applied psychology, neurophysiology, neuropsychiatry, chronobiology, creative writing, and medicine. The center is housed in a state-of-the-art, highly specialized facility designed to understand the development of sleep and wakefulness and drive evidence-based interventions and support for these. Research from our group has determined that the annual incidence of sleep disturbance in the UK is about 37% of the population. Our research has also shown that your first ever episode of untreated sleep disturbance can set you up for an episode of depression. Our focus on the sleep crisis is multifaceted, as sleep is impacted by a system of nested constructs at the individual, social, and societal levels. While as individuals, we have some measure of control and influence over our sleep, through factors like behavior, be it the time we decide to go to bed, the things we do to improve our sleep, our individual beliefs, customs, the effect of our genes, and our individual makeup. We ourselves are embedded in the context of social factors, like our family unit. As we were talking about children before, you know that your plans of sleeping go out the window when children are involved, even your pets, your partner, your neighbors, being caretaker, the neighborhood that you live in, your workplace structure, socioeconomic status, and all of these in turn are under the societal level, where factors like the hyperconnected 24/7 society, which we currently live in and keep barreling towards, affect your sleep. Policy, legislation, geography, the environment, things like how societal constructs affect things like global warming, globalization, all of these things affect everything under it. So sleep needs vary from person to person, and these needs, along with the interactions described above, have an effect on health outcomes. And these are cardiovascular, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, metabolic, immune. So everything, sleep controls everything around us. And optimal performance. So in terms of, next slide, please. So this image is from a 2017 study looking at the cost of insufficient sleep on high-earning nations. For the UK specifically, insufficient sleep costs about 1.86% of the GDP. So this is around 50 billion pounds. A follow-up study done in 2023 looking at chronic insomnia alone found that chronic insomnia alone accounts for 1.35% loss of the GDP. Our research has shown that in the UK, up to 36% of the population, so roughly 1 in 3 people, will experience acute insomnia. So this is a brief period of difficulty falling or staying asleep for 3 or more days a week for less than 3 months. Over that is a different qualification. Over the period of a year. And 7.9% of the population will have it at any given point. So we either are waiting to have it or we already have it. And approximately 1 in 5 of those initially diagnosed with acute insomnia will go on to develop chronic insomnia. These numbers encompass direct and indirect costs through work absenteeism and presenteeism, people calling off of work for sleep. It's about 75% of the global population has called off of work at some point due to poor sleep. Or some of them go to work, but then they're not really there. This also accounts for increased demands on the healthcare system, be it by increased needs for GP appointments or increased hospitalizations. If you don't sleep well regularly, that increases your mortality rate by 13%. But most importantly, and what this project brings, is that we should consider also the costs to each other. Poor sleep contributes to stress, impacts emotional regulation, which can increase interpersonal difficulties and diminish quality of life. Everything becomes harder to accomplish and harder to cope with on your day-to-day. Sleep affects everyone. Its effects ripple through economic and societal issues, and it is a matter of public health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, you might be wondering, given all that Pam has said so far, what does an English literature person do with all of this? And basically, my work, and on the slide you can see a few texts that I've worked on. So I work across fiction, nonfiction, digital culture, as well as the visual arts. My work basically considers what cultural production tells us about the sleep crisis. Because, of course, as the slides that we've just been through with Pam show, the sleep crisis is something that affects us individually, but also societally. And so cultural production is one of the ways through which we kind of relate the individual and the systemic levels. So it can tell us a lot about sleep, sleeplessness, a relationship with sleep and sleeplessness, but also how we see these issues being caused basically by the world around us. And so the kind of argument, broadly speaking, that I make in my work is that cultural representations of sleep today really illuminate how our concerns around the sleep crisis are fundamentally about the nature of contemporary life. So Pam already mentioned a few of the things that I work on as well. So for instance, our relationship with the environment and the climate crisis is something that also influences our sleep, but also our relationship with work and with time more broadly. These are all things that cultural production tells us are crucial to the ways we sleep or don't sleep. And so what I do in my work is basically teasing out the ways in which society thinks about sleep. And there are two main ways, I would argue, that are dominant at the moment. So one, the kind of cultural imperative that sees sleep as a kind of waste of time. And the other, a cultural imperative that sees sleep as instrumental to performance. So something that makes us more productive during the day. And these kind of cultural imperatives are what we need to address in order to address the sleep crisis. And this is really what the collaboration that we've been working on with Pam, colleagues at the Northumbria Center for Sleep Research more broadly, and also Chiara, as well as the Sleep Charity on the Reimagining Sleep project. This is what the project was really addressing. Okay, so a little bit more about the people that contributed to this project beyond Pam and I. So this is the work that Chiara created. This is the kind of banner work that Chiara created for the project. So Chiara Dellerba is an artist and curator based in Nottingham. Her work focuses on ecology, slowing down, resting, collective care practices, and their impact on society. And her artistic practice is really collaborative based. It revolves a lot around co-production with members of the public, and it's really interdisciplinary. So these were all reasons why she was the perfect artist and curator to collaborate with on this project. And for the Reimagining Sleep project, we also collaborated with the Sleep Charity. So this is a UK-based organisation that seeks to promote better sleep for everybody through campaigning about the importance of sleep, and also by providing access to training and evidence-based information around sleep. So on the slide, you can see a screenshot from their manifesto for sleep called Dreaming of Change. which calls the UK government to develop a national sleep strategy to address the UK's sleep crisis. And Pam has already talked about how impactful this sleep crisis is in terms, for instance, of economic cost, which is obviously something that we all need to leverage in order to convince governments to do something about issues, right? Now, importantly, and this is a quotation that you see on the slide, which is what the CEO of the charity wrote for our Reimagining Sleep catalogue. Importantly, the charity recognizes that cultural change needs to take place so that sleep can be given the priority in our society that it both deserves and that it both needs and deserves. So it is really this kind of cultural change that our collaboration on the Reimagining Sleep sought to foster, while also offering the sleep charity new tools effectively to tackle the British sleep crisis. And in fact, it may be interesting for people in the audience psychology or medicine, including, of course, Pam and her colleagues at the Center for Sleep Research. This was really the first time that they were collaborating with humanities and arts researchers. So this was a new thing for them, and obviously I was very happy that they decided to, that they agreed to collaborate on this project with us. And it was a new approach that they said really opened up for them new ways of supporting people with sleep problems via creativity. So a little bit about what happened during the project. I will play this, but without sound, so I can tell you a little bit more. Sorry. Yeah. Is this working? Yeah. So what happened on the Reimagining Sleep project? So the first phase was a creative workshop series, and this is what you can see playing on the video. So the workshop series focused on 3 themes that we identified with the sleep charity as particularly pressing when it comes to today's sleep issues. And these were parenting, aging, and the menopause. So we already talked a little bit about parenting. There you go. The other 2 main topics were aging and the menopause. So participants met first online with myself, Pam, and 2 other colleagues from the Northumbria Center for Sleep Research, Professor Jason Ellis and Dr. Greg Elder. And then they met in person with Chiara, and this is what you can see on the video. So in the online workshops, we came together to talk about the lived experience, basically, of sleep and sleep issues. We shared stories of sleep using literature as a kind of way to open up the discussion around the impact of sleep disorders in our lives. And then Pam and her colleagues outlined strategies to tackle sleep issues. And then following these online workshops, participants met in person with Chiara, where they produced creative responses to sleep. And from the video, you hopefully get a sense of how central, really, sharing and participation were to these workshops. Co-production was really at the center of Reimagining Sleep. Our goal was to connect involve multiple voices in research around sleep. We wanted to foster openness, we wanted to foster transparency, accessibility and experimentation, really, in sleep research across disciplines and practice. So these kind of principles extended to the exhibitions that were the second phase of this project. So Chiara curated 3 exhibitions so far, although we're hoping to put together further exhibitions further down the line. And these were all co-produced with workshop participants, because effectively the works that were exhibited at the exhibitions were things that Chiara re-elaborated following the workshops. So first exhibition was at Newcastle City Library in 2024, and then there was a pop-up at the Late Shows, which is Newcastle and Gateshead cultural crawl. So it happens during a couple of nights per year. And then throughout, we have an online exhibition that is still accessible, and I'm going to share the link with you in a moment. So works collected at these exhibitions had quite a range. There were soundscapes, there were creative writings, there was a deck of cards outlining possible strategies for self-care. There were infographics about plans that have traditionally been used to address sleep issues. And again, all of these works were co-produced with participants. And because, again, co-production was so central to the project, the exhibitions were also quite interactive. So visitors were encouraged to share the stories of sleep, add their own responses to the exhibition. Again, the pictures should give you a sense of how interactive the exhibitions were. You can see people drawing, and this is in response to soundscapes that were playing that were co-produced at the workshops. You can see in the background people jotting, they're basically smelling some herbs and telling us about what those herbs actually remind them of, and whether there's any association with their own relationship with sleep when it comes to smelling these herbs, and so forth. So I'll end the talk today so that we can open it up to questions by just sharing the link to the online exhibition. So again, you'll see that it gathers a kind of extensive collection of objects, artifacts, writings, soundscapes, and they were all produced with and for people who are having sleep issues. And the exhibitions also include toolkits. There's a toolkit about sleep and parenting, one about sleep and aging, and one about sleep and the menopause. And you can download these toolkits, and they invite you to basically respond to the provocations on these toolkits by creating your own response to the provocations, and then you're invited to actually submit your creative responses to the website, and they will in turn be added to the exhibition, which is conceived as this kind of always evolving project. So yeah, I hope you'll consider contributing to the exhibition and the future of the project. So thank you very much.
And thank you both very much, and Chiara Dellerba in her absence. I think you've used this workshop as a wonderful opportunity to encourage us all to co-engage with the online exhibition, which I think is a great way of making sure that you use as much as you possibly can from this project. I'm going to ask you three very set questions that we're asking all our collaborators, because it helps us build all the participants in the collaboration workshops, because it helps us build an overview of how various disciplines co-collaborate. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is kind of the obvious one, though it's often the one that we know least about, which is, how did you come to get together and work? How did this collaboration start in the first place? How did you get together?
Should I take this first, Pam, and then you can add? Okay. So it all started because basically I was very, very lucky to do what is effectively a traditional English literature or cultural studies project about sleep at Northumbria, where there is such a nexus of expertise around sleep. So I think that it was the research office actually that put me in touch with Professor Jason Ellis, and then Jason in turn put me in touch with Pam and other colleagues at the centre. So it was immediately clear to me that there was a scope for collaborating on sleep across disciplines. And this is also in part because from the very beginning of my work on sleep, I found that whenever I talked to a public audience about sleep, they were really interested in hearing what is effectively a different perspective on sleep, because normally the kind of like general public is exposed a lot to ideas around the psychology of sleep or the science of sleep, but there's very little in terms of the literature and culture of sleep. So they would be very interested in hearing more about this side of sleep, but then inevitably they would ask me questions that I simply could not answer. Things like, okay, but what are your strategies to improve my sleep, or how much should I sleep, how much sleep is healthy and how much is unhealthy. And these were all questions that, of course, I'm not remotely qualified to answer. So I thought that, there was scope basically to put together different expertise and actually expose the public to both the science and the culture of sleep. So one of the first things that we did together with colleagues at the Northumbria Centre for Sleep Research was a writing and podcast commission in collaboration with New Writing North, which is called Sleep Stories. Basically, we commissioned three British writers, to write short stories about sleep that were then introduced by myself and sleep scientists. Basically, one of them was Jason Ellis from the Centre for Sleep Research. And there's a second season in the making now. And so Reimagining Sleep is kind of a continuation, really, of this kind of project that mixes the science and culture of sleep. And it also adds into this idea of co-production that Chiara brought to the project, really, because we all felt that it was an important aspect that could foster, openness effectively in the collaboration, and also in the work with communities that are not seen as just people that we do research on, but actually people that can help us with the research and that can give us their insights and can drive the research effectively. Don't know, Pam, whether you feel there's something else that you want to add to the question.
The collaboration was important because we were all aligned in the same way, but also one of our aims at Northumbria Sleep Research is to really have people understand that sleep is not just about sleep. It's about all of us. It's about some of the theories about dreaming is that it's a manifestation of our creative interiors. And so this was very aligned with sleep and bringing people's internal experiences out. Because most of the time when people talk to us specifically about sleep, it's very scientific. They read something here, they read something there, and it's very in a very specific box where they don't think they can add something to it, where it's like we all sleep differently and we all have rich inner worlds that manifest in different ways.
Can I ask, I mean, you can't really speak for Chiara, but was she integral to the project from the get-go? Because she came from Nottingham, I think I heard.
Yeah. So Chiara is somebody, I was living in Nottingham before I met her there, and I always wanted to collaborate with her because I saw the amazing work that she was doing in terms of co-producing with local communities there, especially around environmental issues. So basically, she was written into the application from the very beginning, and she helped us design the project. So yeah, she was involved from the very beginning, basically.
That's great, because quite often, even now, artistic practice or socially engaged practice tends to be instrumentalized, but this seems like it was all being co-produced. You're nodding away, so you're familiar with the dilemma. But it's also, I think, useful for our audience to bear in mind that this has been a collaboration that's come out of contact, location, and resources, institutional resources. Because if I heard you correctly, Diletta, it was the research office that put you in touch with the. So I think that this is one of the ways in which, in effect, the collaboration is greater because it's rooted in the culture of the institution as well as the culture of the place. It looks like I hope that was a useful summary of the project so far. Let's dig a little bit deeper, if I can. Can you tell me a little bit more about how the collaboration works in practice, both its challenges and its pleasures? Sometimes people tell us more about the challenges, sometimes people tell us more about the pleasures. Always curious to know which side of the balance and when those challenges arose and how they arose, and when did you say, yay, we're really on? From what Pam just said, it sounds like you were aligned from the get-go, but pleasure and challenges.
Again, Pam, should I start? Do you want to start?
I'll do. So for me, the pleasure and the challenges are the same thing. It's what people want to bring.
Yeah.
And if they don't, how comfortable they feel in what they bring. And then if you don't get that dialogue going, then that is a challenge, but it's basically the same.
That's a great answer. It's true. It's true. It also depends on the people involved so much, doesn't it? It's those personalities and how on a particular day they're going to interact. I'll ask for some specific instances of that if I can in a minute, but over to Diletta for her view.
I think that Pam is absolutely right. And I think that, sometimes, and again, obviously, because this is an English Association event, I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes, the challenge is basically within interdisciplinary research to make other disciplines kind of see the value of what we do. And so it depends really a lot on the openness of the other parties, right? And so, Pam and her colleagues were really open to what I and Chiara could do around sleep. So we were lucky in that sense because otherwise the project would have never started, right? So you need to find the right people that are open to what you do. And then I think that the challenge in that sense is trying to come up with a way of actually piecing together a project that values everybody's work and everybody's ways of working in a way that feels organic. So, piecing together an approach that works for everybody and that doesn't feel instrumental, I suppose, going back to what you were saying before, right? Or something that you do just for the sake of it, because that, I don't know, it might bring some kind of benefits to you professionally or institutionally or however you want to put it, right? So it's that openness to the collaboration and to the value of other disciplines, but also, trying to develop an organic approach really across ways of working.
So can I press you a little bit harder on that? I mean, this sounds like one of the things that you might have had in your mind was something like a hierarchy of values or a way of acknowledging the work that everybody was doing. Acknowledgement is important, or recognition, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you might. So I'd love to hear you both on that. But tell me about moments of particular joy or moments there where you thought, "Oh, this is not going to work," and then it did.
So I think like moments of particular joy. Well, so my background is actually in the philosophy of art, so I'm really interested in art. So to me, one of the pleasures of this project was to actually see people producing art.
Right. That's lovely.
And then being also, especially at the pop-up that we organized as part of the late shows, because we were there for the entire night that the event took place, seeing the joy that people really got from engaging with the artworks and knowing all the work that was behind it and all the community's input and all the researchers' input from across disciplines, seeing it come alive in that way and seeing people and the audience engaging with it so enthusiastically. I think that for me that was really a pleasure, a massive pleasure. Yeah.
Pam.
For me, it was I participated as a participant, not to be redundant, in one of the workshops at a later stage of the project, and Jason also participated. And for me, it was a joy to take myself out of the context of sleep expert and just sit around the table. And at the time, we did a popcorn style. Everybody put a little line of poetry in. We created a poem, and I remember somebody, and obviously it was around sleep. And one of the lines that to this day still sticks with me is somebody said, "There are monsters under the bed, but they're my friends." And I was like, oh, couldn't have experienced this.
I think that's. Can you repeat that just so that everybody listening in or can actually? There are monsters under the bed,
but they're my friends. And this was after we did some exercises around sleep, and people thought about their sleep, and it was somebody having a moment of reconciling with their bedroom environment and just having a different perspective and just sharing it.
That's a lovely moment of where you were able to step outside, as you say, your expertise, and you remember the line of the poem, which
it was very striking.
Yeah, well, isn't that interesting? I mean, so poetry sometimes does make things happen. In other words, which is a nice moment for us to think about, actually, in a very culture-rich environment, actually. I think that's also important. Okay, anything, you're resisting me about difficult moments. So I'm imagining that 5 years of joy happened. But okay, so Diletta, you might want to come back in.
The online workshops, for instance, were not as well attended as we, in particular, the one about parenting. Having just become a parent myself, I now understand why it is impossible. I mean, obviously now I'm here, and I made it on time and everything. But if something isn't compulsory for your schedule because it's, for instance, part of your work, it's really hard to, on the day, make sure that you're there at the exact time. So then Chiara did an amazing work in terms of actually going to parents herself to try and make sure that their perspectives could feed into the project. And yeah, but that was definitely a hard moment. And I think that, yeah, I mean,
That's great. It's
I don't
great.
but I think that we were all quite disappointed that day because we thought, oh gosh.
Well, there's something about the sort of need to have numbers that you can record when you're doing workshops, but actually the experience led to a rethinking of the project. So I think that really benefited in the end. You just worked through it. And I think that's a really important staging post. Pam, have you got anything similar? Were you concerned about workshops?
Yeah, as a researcher,
Of
your
course.
best laid plans never survive first contact with the general public. So you never know what's going to happen until it happens.
Mm.
That is a general disappointment in my career, in my life.
Absolutely. I think we're in a kind of workshop environment now, though fortunately this one's recorded and we do know that there are many hits, views of that recording on the EA website afterwards. So I think there is a benefit, even if I always say to myself, you only have to reach one person and it will transform things. But I know it's disheartening. So that is something that's not unique to your project by any means. Okay, third and final question. What do you think you have been able to do as a result of this collaboration? Or what have you learned? So it's kind of like standing back. What have you learned? What new things, or what have you learned? Diletta gave me a mini example of that. But what do you think what is the nature of the collaboration? You're good thinkers, you two. I can see you thinking aloud here. Well, not thinking aloud, but you know what I mean.
Due to that, all perspectives are important and they all have value.
That's a great summary. Again, that all perspectives are important and all have value. That's something that we can bring from one project to the next, isn't it? That you can build that in. Diletta, what about you?
Yeah, very similar in the sense that I was going to say the importance of co-production with colleagues, but also with communities and kind of like methods for that, that we were developing, right, during the project in a sense. So we were trying to find out what could work and what would not work. And, the example that I gave about the workshop with very few participants is an example where, as you say, you need to kind of like rethink things. And it's something that, yeah, teaches you going forward, the value of finding out different ways of engaging people where they're at, basically. Yeah.
Also engaging people where they're at, another kind of headline quote. I'm moving to the chat now. I think Hadas has a question and a comment. I don't know if he can speak, but I'll read it to you. And I think the answer, I'm going to see if I predict successfully who's going to answer this question. But my son has never slept through the night since birth, currently 5 years and 10 months, tends to wake up after 1 a.m. and then needs assistance falling back to sleep. I've always had issues in my sleep, and since becoming a parent, it has become non-existent. I always have a routine in place for bedtime, and I'm really strict as he can't manage with changes. I would love any advice, here it goes, on how to keep him asleep throughout the night. Wouldn't every parent of a young child? But who's going to answer that one?
I have a feeling it might be Pam.
Parents. So this is an easy question to answer and a hard question to answer. So perhaps being as strict is not the way to go. We have to be flexible with what we're trying, and sometimes what we're trying doesn't work. But routine is the most important part of all. But if maybe you're going to bed too early, and it might be pushing back bedtime a little, so it extends, but also perhaps starting, and this is a very delicate subject, starting to foster independence at a wake-up time at night where maybe you don't go in as quickly and they start learning to self-soothe. It's a hard time for parents in general, and there's so many expectations put on you. Like, your friends will say, oh, my child sleeps for 8 hours. My child is the best. Sleep training, this is what you need to do. But everybody's different. Every family unit is different. And we all have to figure out what that means for us individually. So it's a lot of trial and error, but the important parts are routine, being gentle with yourself and your child, and also sometimes less is more. Pull back a little bit.
Thank you, Pam. And I hope that helps all parents struggling and grandparents struggling with sleepless children and grandchildren, or caregivers similarly. A different sort of a question now. Many thanks for your presentation. Can you please elaborate on the books chosen for the project? So something about bibliography, what they teach, what they expect. What about the reading experiences and bibliography of the project? What they can do, what literature can teach us about the experience of sleep, sleeplessness, and sleep disturbance.
So for the Reimagining Sleep project, basically for every workshop, so as I said, there were 3 themes. So the one about parenting, the one about aging, and one about the menopause. And for each workshop, I chose one extract from a text that spoke to that specific theme. So for instance, in the case of sleep and aging, it was, I think, Marina Benjamin's, Insomnia, which is a memoir of insomnia, where she was basically talking about her experience of insomnia. And I chose a moment that was particularly evocative precisely because it dealt with the idea of aging and how it related to sleep. And so what we did in the workshop was basically just kind of like reading it together and then see if it spoke to participants' experiences. And sometimes these extras did speak to them, sometimes they didn't. But I think that, again, as English literature lovers or scholars, I think we would all agree that literature is a way to kind of like foster empathy and understanding. So even if it doesn't necessarily speak to you, you might be able to see glimpses of things that do, or you might be able to see glimpses of somebody else's experience, and then that might be a way for you to think about your own experiences. So I kind of use the literature as a way to open up discussions, but the text chosen for the project specifically were texts that spoke to the themes of the workshops, basically. Whereas for the research more broadly, it's kind of like, basically, it was a really long process of selecting texts that spoke about sleep or sleeplessness and thinking through how they represented sleep in relation to wider society and the contemporary moment.
It's a fascinating project overall because of the ways in which sleep is at the heart of so much of our own individual engagement with the world and society and culture, the whole of it. I read to fall asleep, actually, but I probably shouldn't be saying that that as an English lit person. I probably shouldn't be saying that, but it always works. So let's see what else is coming up in the chat. Mandy Page is giving you compliments, very much enjoying the webinar. It's informative and inspiring, love it, and your generosity in giving your time to share, which I think speaks to a kind of very generous collaboration, it sounds like, that has been going on here throughout your work together. And a more specific but very challenging, I imagine, question coming from Anna. Is it possible to say if the problem of sleeplessness is more acute now than it was, say, before the Industrial Revolution? I'm a pre-modernist by expertise, so I'm familiar with these kinds of questions. Can the evidence be found in literary works? So that's a historical question and a literary question. And Diletta is nodding away. She's had this one before, I think.
Yeah, well, similar questions. So I think, so it's in part a problem of terminology, in the sense that, for instance, insomnia as we know it today and as we define it today, it's not that it didn't exist. Of course it did, but it wasn't spoken about in the same way. And so that's one problem in terms of finding the evidence of whether, you know, the sleeplessness is more acute now or if it's the same before. The other thing, so there was this project by Eckert, which basically kind of like analyzed a wide range of texts. Among these texts were, well, mainly literary texts, actually, but Roger Eckert is a historian. And basically, he found out that before the Industrial Revolution, the way that we talked about sleep was about two phases, the first and the second sleep. And so effectively what this kind of work, although it's contested, and Pam might be able to potentially say a little bit more about these kind of debates, but the argument that Eckert made was that basically before the Industrial Revolution, sleep happened in two phases, and that it was only with the Industrial Revolution and also the introduction of electric light that sleep was consolidated in one phase. So effectively, you know, what this kind of work shows is that the way that we think sleep is normal is very historically situated. And so these kind of texts, amongst them literary texts, basically tell us about our relationship with sleep in that specific moment in time. That would be my answer to the question. But I don't know, Pam, whether you've got anything more to add on this idea of the first and second sleep.
The double phase?
Well,
not going to get into that one, but there's also the way that we think that everybody, I did hoist myself on my own petard because I said that we all sleep, but we don't all sleep the same. Sleep is also a socioeconomic luxury. There's people that shift workers, and before the Industrial Revolution and even after, people that were in trades that were not, there's a lot of socioeconomic and power dynamics things that do affect your sleep. So we were probably all in a sleep crisis at all points. It's just that some people had more comfort to not experience it, and the way we conceptualized it back then versus how now. And there's still debate on sleep poverty, bed poverty, and all of these things, but sleep is the first thing that people let go of. And I'm sure that happened back then too.
And I think what your current research is saying is that it is culturally, socially, and economically situated in any period. So it doesn't, in a sense, you wouldn't expect to see exactly the same conditions at different historical or different geographical or ethnographical moments in the world. So I think that, and I think there is, however, I do think there is a kind of seduction about this persistent idea of the two sleeps. It's almost like a projection, a wishfulness. The material I work with, I see that very rarely. What I see is ordered sleep in certain particular cultural constructions. But there's too many other things going on. So there's something really interesting about that persistent idea of a past where things were different, right?
Sleep is biological, it's a biological imperative, but it's also behavioral. We can override the biological imperative. Back in the day, it was you were in the cave and the lion's coming in, so hey, I'm not sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it turned into you have to get up at 3 a.m. because you have to turn on all the gas lamps.
Yeah.
And now it's you're a shift worker, or
Yeah.
you're on YouTube, or you're on TikTok. It's
Yeah.
override the biological to our detriment.
That's a really important, powerful point. There's a very long comment, but with a very short question at the end of it. So I'm just going to ask the short question. I hope I might have to go through the chat to see if I've missed anything. But it's an interesting one because it asks, are there, and I think this is from Harold, are there any benefits to sleeplessness?
No.
So, second question, should those with insomnia always try to fit a more normal pattern?
So there is no normal in the general sense. There it's what is normal to you. So for you, that means you wake up, you feel rested, you don't feel sleepy during the day, you don't feel groggy. That is your normal. And if that means you sleep 6 hours a night, 7, 8, that's what it means to you. We get caught up in all these, like, you have to sleep this. Sleeping 6 hours or less is bad in any case. Listen to me on that one. But some people need more sleep, some people less sleep. We've all had, children sleep the most of all of us. We've all had the longest sleeps of our nights in the past. And as you age, your sleep needs become different. But the acid test is, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel good? Do you feel good during your day? Do you feel attentive? Is the world a joy to exist in? And if it's not, then we need to go back and assess your sleep.
Thank you so much for that. That's a really helpful, I hope, answer to the question. There is one from Mandy, I think is this. I've recently become single and realized that years of broken sleep, including parenting, have almost been cured overnight. Any tips for those living with snorers? I'm going to ask Diletta that, but Pam might want to come in on that. We're always looking for answers, aren't we? But anyway, start with Diletta and then come back to Pam.
No, I'm going to sit this one out. I have no idea. I haven't found anything in the creative works about tips for living with snorers. So no, I can't answer this one, but I'm sure that Pam might be.
I think culturally we kind of think of snoring as you're having a good sleep, you're snoring, like, and we don't think about snoring as, unless it bothers your sleep as a problem, it's kind of like a joke. But if there is snoring, they should probably see their GP and dig a little deeper into that, because it's usually not just snoring. Sometimes it is, but the best way to live with it is to seek advice on it.
Thank you. I think I've covered most of the questions or observations so far in the chat. We've got a little bit more time. I kind of, I think there's one more here that I'm coming at. Okay, no, it's only a thank you, I think, at the end. I'd like us to do a quick wrap up. I think you've been incredibly generous and gracious in your time offer to this workshop. What would you want to say in a single sentence to each other about working on this project? Going to start with Diletta. More than thank you. I mean, from your different disciplinary perspectives, perhaps.
I think just like, thank you for being open to other approaches and to the idea of collaborating together, basically. I think, I know it's partially a thank you, but it's about openness, right? And receptiveness as well, because again, I think that if those aspects aren't there, then that is a problem for collaborating, of course.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat too and say a thank you, but for increasing the reach and changing the way people think about their sleep, and taking it out of a hyper medicalized and hyper diminished context, because we all, you Google and 5 tips to sleep better, and it's always, and people latch on to these things and they're so generic, and this project opens up to the rich tapestry of everybody's experience.
thank you both so much. I mean, you've invited us to think more carefully, to slow down, to explore, and to learn. But you've also invited us to think very carefully and precisely about cultural conditions, about precision in your work, and about respect, and ultimately, I think about openness, generosity, and we call it co-creation, but creation doesn't happen unless there is that possibility, that openness and generosity, in order to do it in the first place. And I want to end, I mean, never mind the sleeplessness. This has been a really joyful webinar. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking them.
Thank you so much for the invitation again and for the amazing questions. Thank you.
Thank you all.